He pulled his pants down in one swift motion, not giving me a chance to speak. There was something huge in my mouth. Ethan and I had never tried anything like this before. Chapter 1: Forbidden Spark. My name is Olivia. I am 49 years old, well-groomed and fit. I like to dress boldly. I am confident in my body, and I am also married and a mother of a son. Over the years, my marriage fell into a routine, and by the time I realized my feelings were fading, it was too late. My life with my husband Ethan and our son, Jake, followed a predictable path until Jake's best friend, Ryan, unknowingly brought a spark into my life. I had known Ryan for years. He and Jake had been friends since high school and had practically grown up in our house. He had grown from a tall, confident boy into a strikingly confident man who was fully aware of his youthful energy. His eyes were always full of life, but lately I sensed something different in the way he looked at me. I was almost certain I wasn't seeing things. One evening, Ethan and I had come home from our mutual friend, Justin's birthday party. Jake and Ryan were playing PlayStation. They didn't even turn to look at us. Ethan went straight to the bedroom. I bent down to take off my high-heeled shoes. I felt my thin cotton miniskirt slip above my knee. My hips were slightly spread. I was thinking, is it too short? When I saw Ryan between my legs. His eyes slid up my legs, then lingered on my hips. One evening, Jake and Ryan were watching a movie in the living room, while I was making snacks in the kitchen. I was wearing a tight silk blouse and a short skirt that hugged my curves perfectly. When I stepped outside, Ryan's eyes slid down my legs, past my waist and down my lips. The smug smile of youth made my heart race and my stomach turn. I quickly averted my eyes, telling myself that I was thinking too much, and headed back to the kitchen. As I bent down to grab a bottle of juice from the refrigerator, I felt my miniskirt cling to my hips. I realized that there was a gasp in my backside. I turned to see Ryan. He was standing in the doorway, fingers twiddling the watch band on his left wrist. Ryan's gaze traveled down my collarbone, which quivered beneath my silk blouse, slowly and deliberately, like a snake wrapping around its prey. "Need some help, Liv?" he said. I felt sweat dripping down my skin, leaving chocolate marks that melted in the coolness of the air conditioner. That night, after everyone else was asleep, I went downstairs to get a glass of water. The dim light from the living room showed Ryan lying on the couch, working on his phone. I was wearing a thin satin nightgown, the fabric barely covering my thighs. My nipples were sharp and prominent against the thin satin. When he noticed me, he looked up and asked in his deep, velvety voice, "Couldn't you sleep, Liv?" He used to say Mrs. Carter. Now, even the way he called me Liv was enveloping my mind like the chorus of a forbidden song. There was something about the way he said my name. A small, knowing smile appeared on his lips. I returned his smile, barely recognizable. "Sometimes I sleep uneasily." I stood between the kitchen and the living room, uncertain but unwilling to leave. His eyes were locked on mine, and I could feel the pull between us. Ryan stood up slowly and walked toward the kitchen. I was shocked. He was wearing only his boxers and a noticeable bulge. I quickly looked away. Our arms brushed lightly as he passed me. But the fleeting contact sent a jolt through me, something raw and electric. He paused as if he sensed it too. My breath caught and I pulled back, setting my glass down on the counter as if to steady myself. I was about to turn back when I felt a bulge between my thighs. Ryan brushed past me. "Your kitchen is too small," he said. I panicked and retreated back to the bedroom. This was only the beginning. I could feel something taking root between us, no matter how wrong it was. And I didn't know where it would lead. But I couldn't get that little moment we had in the kitchen out of my mind. In fact, I got aroused when I thought about it. Chapter 2: Dangerous Game. The next morning, I felt a strange uneasiness in my chest. It was just a passing moment. It will pass, I told myself. But I couldn't ignore how my pulse quickened when Ryan was there. I had worn a thin, off-the-shoulder top and loose pajamas for breakfast. I had no panties on, so my pajamas clung to my hips and got in between. It was comfortable but vaguely seductive. I avoided eye contact with Ryan, but I could feel his gaze on my hip. He chatted to Jake as if nothing had happened, but when his eyes met mine, I knew he remembered last night as clearly as I did. The days passed, and the tension between us only grew. Ryan stayed with us every weekend, finding subtle ways to touch me, to say things that seemed innocent but really blew my mind. One afternoon, while Jake was out and Ethan was at work, the doorbell rang. It was Ryan. I told him Jake wasn't home. But he said it's okay, and he came in. Now we were alone in the house. I was wearing a tight red dress, the thin strap sliding down my shoulders as I moved. I felt him sniff my neck as he passed me. Then he paused and didn't back down. "You're avoiding me, Olivia, but I know you feel it too." I held my breath. The distance between us had narrowed. I wanted to look away, to deny it all. But I couldn't. His fingers brushed lightly over mine. The contact was brief, but it sent a shiver through me. "Ryan, this isn't true," I whispered, my voice betraying me. His gaze didn't waver. "Then why does it feel so real?" I took a step back, as if I were trying to remind both of us of the boundaries that needed to exist. "We can't do this. You're Jake's best friend, and I'm married," he said before I could finish my gaze. "And you're a neglected woman." Then he took a step forward. So I was sandwiched between the wall and Ryan. He shook his head slightly, but there was a challenge in his eyes. "I'm just saying what we both already know. Every time you look at me, your heart races." Before I could respond, the sound of the front door opening startled me. Jake was home. Ryan slowly walked away, and I forced my hands to stay still as Jake grinned into the kitchen. "What are you doing?" he asked casually. Ryan smiled casually. "We were talking about dinner." I took a deep breath, regaining my composure. But I knew something irreversible was happening inside me. Chapter 3, Playing with Fire. As the days turned into weeks, the unspoken tension between us became impossible to ignore. Every time Ryan got closer, my body responded instinctively. His gaze, his words, even the way he breathed. Everything about him ignited something deep inside me. But it had become a dangerous game, and we both knew the rules. One evening, Ryan showed up unexpectedly while Jake was out with his friends. I was outside, watering the plants in our backyard, wearing a tight, sheer summer dress that clung in all the right places. Suddenly, he touched my hips and spun me around, kissing me on the lips. It was a bold move, but also a stupid one. I pulled back and slapped him, my face hard, and I said, "Never do that again." He grabbed his face and mumbled, "Did you miss me?" I tried to fight the pull between us, but my breath betrayed me, coming faster than I wanted. Ryan moved closer, his hands on my waist, and in that moment, logic was gone. His lips met mine. I could feel his hands between my legs, and I was very wet. I pulled back quickly and said, "Not here, someone will see," and I went inside. Chapter 4, The Inevitable Conclusion. No matter how hard we tried to resist, Ryan and I finally gave in to what was growing between us. One night, when Ethan was out of town and Jake was out with his friends, the last shred of inhibitions disappeared. I pulled a delicate black lace robe over my bare skin, knowing deep down that I had crossed a line I could not take back. And when Ryan entered my room, his eyes dark with determination, I knew there was no going back. I dropped my black lace robe at my feet as if I were surrendering to the executioner. He grabbed me by the hair and forced me to my knees. He pulled his pants down in one swift motion, not giving me a chance to speak. There was something huge in my mouth. Ethan and I had never tried anything like this before. He had always been gentle with me. Now Ryan was treating me like his slave. I had difficulty breathing for a moment, but Ryan didn't pull me back. Then he saw the desperation in my eyes, and suddenly, he picked me up and threw me onto the bed. Then he was on top of me, and before I knew it, I felt him inside me. He was squeezing my throat and cursing at me. In a very strange way, I was incredibly pleased by the way he was behaving. Ryan's fingerprints slid down my back like bullets, leaving marks. "You're going to suffocate inside me," he moaned, his hips pressing between my legs like staples. I was at the height of pleasure. After a few minutes of this, Ryan was getting even rougher and faster. That little frail boy was gone, and a strong, knowing-it-all man was here. Then he collapsed on top of me, screaming. I haven't experienced anything like this since college. I don't know how this will end, but we're still playing this game. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story.